but to other matters, and a conversation we had some years ago, which has now prompted the launch of a new charity called Olly's Light Travels, with a film and a book, all tracking back to a very sad story involving a young man who, at a young age, decided to take his life. The charity has been set up in the memory. We go back to 2017. Now, Anne Feloy is the founder of Olly's Future. That is the charity. Joins me now. Thank you for coming on the show. We'll talk about, of course, what you hope to achieve, but if you wouldn't mind, just remind the listeners, we've talked before, as I mentioned, why we had that conversation. Morning to you.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me here.
Not at all.
Yes, you're right. I lost my beloved son Oliver to suicide when he was 22 years old, and that was in 2017. And I have since worked tirelessly, really, in suicide prevention, setting up the charity in his memory with friends that are the trustees. And that was 7 years ago now, so he would have been 30 this year.
Oh.
And we've trained over 5,500 people in suicide prevention through our training. But this is a very personal tribute to my son.
How do you train? I mean, we're having this conversation, Anne, as you're probably aware because you work in this field. The suicide rate in England is the highest for some 25 years. Particularly, it has to be, unfortunately, in male suicide, young suicide again. You work in suicide prevention. How do you train someone in that, Anne?
Well, what I've done with a colleague is to create 10 tools. They're practical tools to spot the signs, know how to then ask in a very sensitive and non-judgmental way about their feelings, whether they are having thoughts of suicide, and then how to keep them safe and then get them some help. It's not counselling, it's not therapy, but I hope it's a drop in the ocean because, the mental health crisis is everyone's aware of it. So that's my effort and lobbying as well for medical students to get suicide prevention as part of their training. It's not actually part of their core curriculum. So these young students going to become our doctors, they don't even have the training that I wish everyone had. So a lot of work going on.
Yes.
But actually, yes. So
what can you tell us about young Olly?
Well, yes. Well, he would have been 30 this year. And when he died, he had been incredibly, he'd loved life. I can only sum it up as that. He'd travelled around the world. He'd done a gap year. And what he did during that gap year is he travelled to Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, the whole of South America. And what actually stood out, and everybody who knows him would say that, he always did something so much more special than others. And in this case, he kept all his journals of his travels.
Oh, right.
So he wrote copious amounts about every day of his travels. And when he died, he actually left them in quite a prominent place. I didn't know they'd existed, actually. I knew he was keeping some notes, but I had no idea that he had so many of these notepads in his rucksack. And he left them. And I've spent years really reading them, working with friends to type them all up. And
Yes.
now I've actually produced a book which is called Oliver's Travels.
Right.
I called him Oliver, everyone else called him Olly.
Right.
But it's his photographs, it's all the travels
Yes.
that he did. And we've put them into a book. And some filmmakers heard about this, and they have worked with me to create a 90-minute documentary about the charity,
Right.
about Oliver, and about his journals, because they're the archetypal gap year, really.
Okay.
Anyone that's done a sort of gap year travels will
Sure.
relate to this.
How can people, I'll have to move on in a moment, and how can people get a copy of the book? Or there's a ticket, I think, to an event they could come to.
Yes, we've got the launch of the film and the book tomorrow night at the Century Club. I'm delighted to be having
That's in
them
central
hosting
London.
it. And that's in Soho, Shaftesbury Avenue. The film, doors open at 6:30. The film is at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Do come along and look. You can get the tickets on the actual club website,
All right.
Century Club, Love and Light Party, or contact me through the charity.
The charity is Olly's Future. Just lastly, And all the work you've done since you lost your son, over 7 years ago, what have you
Yeah.
learnt about suicide, particularly young people? What have you
I
learned?
would I would say that it is no one is immune to it. You think that there's a certain type, not at all. Anybody can have thoughts of suicide. We know that. We know that 1 in 20 people might try and attempt to take their own life in their lifetime. And Nick, I should say you're in the film.
Oh, am
You're
I?
actually in the film.
Oh, Lord.
Yes,
What,
yes.
what have you got on me? What... Is it when we
We
discussed this
interviewed you.
before?
You interviewed me in
Yes,
2018,
I remember.
and we've used that clip. We've had permission to use that
Of
clip.
course.
So
Well, yeah.
still here battling away, doing my bit for Oliver and other young people to
I
keep
hope
them
it
safe.
goes well this weekend. Thanks. Good to speak with you again in obviously difficult circumstances, and good to see you. And Feloy is founder of Olly's Future, set up in the memory of her son.